This is a teaching that I've been working on, but this certain piece of the puzzle did not come until last night because there's been talk and fear mongering regarding, nuclear exchange for ages. Ages. This is one of the biggest tools the enemy has is to keep the entire population on the edge of their seat. What I'm going to talk about is a tightly held secret. This is known amongst all the upper class military generals. Very few whistleblowers understand this. But so for generations, guys, we have lived under the looming fear of a nuclear annihilation. Literally, think about how much control, fear they have pushed. I mean, they even had it in classrooms to duck and cover during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Governments, militaries, medias alike have drilled it into our minds, the belief that at any moment, a push of a button, entire nations could be reduced to ash. But behind this narrative lies a truth that has been concealed for over 80 years. A truth that reveals not only a scientific deception, but a cosmic boundary set by the hand of God himself. See, nuclear weapons, they do exist. But they are not the all-powerful, the instant destruction devices that we have been told and taught and put fear into our minds over for the last 80 years. Their use is not determined merely by military will or political orders. Rather, their very function is bound by the laws of God that have been hidden from the public, but understood by a small circle of classified scientists and military leaders. This is very interesting. And there was one man that had came forward years ago and was silenced for this. His name was Bruce Cathy, a New Zealand airline captain turned physicist. He uncovered this hidden truth. He discovered that nuclear detonations cannot happen just anywhere or at any point. Through the years of study and observation of atmospheric phenomena and nuclear test data, through several different military operations, he identified a precise energetic grid overlaying that covers the Earth, a harmonic structure that aligns with the geomagnetic field, ley lines, that correspond with the movements of the sun. See, the truth is, for a nuclear device to detonate successfully, it must be in an exact alignment with the harmonic grid, synchronized with the sun's angular relationship to the Earth at a very specific location. Translation: this means a nuclear detonation is a cosmic event, not just a chemical or a physical one. It is tied to resonance, frequency, and alignment. And I'm going to go into detail on when they can actually happen. But these are things that just cannot happen if just some crazy person able to get to the button. Just to kind of lay that out there so that hopefully trims a little bit of the edge off of anxiety. So what I have found after combining just lots of data, even speaking with my father on this, nuclear devices can only detonate within 2 narrow windows each year, when the Earth and the Sun align in a very specific way that allows energy to flow through specific nodes on the Earth's electromagnetic grid. If a nuclear device is activated outside of that window, or outside of any one of the geographic points, it will either fail to detonate or only produce a normal explosion based off of its yield. You will not split the atom and get the explosion that is intended. So mathematical models have been developed that are so precise that the predicted timing and locations of everything has been made aware. For example, French nuclear tests in the Pacific use these equations. Again, keep in mind that the classified military government agencies keep a tight lid on this. And the information is only available to a small few. For many, they're going to hear what I'm saying and completely write it off with mockery. But I would encourage you to listen to what I say in full and then take the data that I provide and dig for yourself. Take it to the Lord. Research the physics. Research the science. Research the previous detonations, the dates, and the locations. See, this explains one of the greatest mysteries in modern warfare. Think about it. If these weapons are so powerful, why have they never been used again after 1945? Why were they not used in Vietnam, Korea, Iraq, Afghanistan? Why weren't they used recently when Pakistan and India were headed off with each other? Why haven't they been used over the last few years in a tactical setting with Russia and Ukraine? I'm not saying they have to drop a 50 megaton that decimates an entire country, but quote, quote, tactical nukes of this caliber are able to vaporize an entire battalion instantly. Why? Because they can't work without permission from the heavens. The bomb works only when the geometry of the earth, the position of the sun, the location of the device align in perfect harmony. The power is not just in the bomb. It is in the exact timing and location. I'll give you an example. Hiroshima, Nagasaki. They worked. The bombs were not dropped randomly. They were dropped within the exact harmonic window. The first bomb, Little Boy, detonated over Hiroshima August 6, 1945. The second, Fat Man, was dropped over Nagasaki August 9th. These dates, as you'll see as I go further into this, fall squarely within the 2 annual windows of the sun's position. The locations, the geomagnetic alignment was perfect. And the Earth's grid allowed for detonation in that specific geo-coordinates. So this is not merely military strategic decisions that are being made. They have to align specifically to cosmic appointments. The weapons functioned not by man's authority alone, but by God opening the celestial window that he does twice a year. See, this understanding destroys the whole myth of total nuclear war. Impossible. Because the popular image of hundreds of warheads flying across the globe in minutes, obliterating continents, it's not reality. See, here, in truth, if multiple warheads were launched, almost every one of them would fail to detonate because they would not fall within the narrow harmonic window or be in the grid coordinates, to be specific. A feat that makes it practically impossible on a global scale. This is why all nuclear tests are spaced out, conducted in extreme secrecy, and aligned to very specific times, windows, and coordinates. See, the public are told that these are for safety and containment, but the truth is, they have to find the exact resonance point. This knowledge also reveals something really profound about the nature of divine restraint. Paul writes in Thessalonians that a restraining force is currently at work preventing the full manifestation of evil upon the appointed time. And this is echoed in Revelations 9, where 4 angels are bound at the great river Euphrates, prepared for release only at the exact year, month, date, hour. This is not just spiritual metaphors. This is divine laws. As God has embedded into his creation the boundary lines and rules for judgment, a lock that prevents mankind from wielding the full destruction until the exact moment he allows. The limitations placed upon nuclear detonation are a reflection of him ultimately being in control and still holding restraint on the world. So it's no coincidence that we live in a world ruled by fear. This narrative has allowed governments to justify massive military spending, global surveillance, a continuing of government programs, all built off the fear that the bomb has been used to enslave the minds of the people. They have justified all of this spending, but really put the money into underground cities for a different reason. See, the real power isn't the bomb, but the belief that it could go off at any moment when they want to pull the trigger. Because the true weapon is fear itself. What we've been told is the bomb gives a man godlike power, but the truth is God has not relinquished control. The bomb only works when the heavens permit. Its detonation is not the symbol of mankind's mastery, but a testimony to the limits of his reach. See, I'm going to expose the lie in depth. As the fallen angels had this technology mastered. But what Oppenheimer found and what the Nazi Germans found when they had it, see, back up 1 second. You'll notice that when Nazi Germany fell, it was long before summer. And Oppenheimer and all the different Nazi scientists had this technology already figured out. They just couldn't figure out why it wouldn't work. They had it figured out. They had it all mapped out. It wasn't till their test explosion in the Nevada desert that they realized it was based off timing and location and not off the science. Otherwise, Nazi Germany would have used this long before. Do you think that it would have allowed the Russians and the Allies to do what they did if they yielded that power? Because they had it figured out. The fallen angels had given it to them. But the timing, they didn't have that part of the equation. So we're going to explore the psychological warfare behind this nuclear myth, the inconsistencies, the impossibilities of simultaneous detonations, the false science behind nuclear winter, and the rise of secret weapons that they have already that are far more dangerous than an atomic bomb. We're going to talk about some things such as scalar weapons and other things that will literally leave people shaken. As this goes deep, and I'm trying to be very careful the words that I use so I don't have to do rumble only. Understand, though, that the nuclear weapons are cosmically bound by the laws of God. If that was not the case, guys, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but Nazi Germany would have used it long before the scientists figured it out. You ever wonder why they didn't? Because I did. I always wondered why. Nazi Germany didn't use this technology. You know, things that make you go, So after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a new age was born. Not an age of peace through power, but an age of fear through illusion. In the span of 3 days in August of 1945, the United States declared to the world that it had possessed a weapon so destructive that no nation could ever challenge it again. From that point forward, the bomb itself became the symbol of ultimate authority. A tool, not just for warfare, but of global psychological dominance. But see, behind that mushroom cloud, behind the Cold War standoff and the arms race, behind the textbooks and political speeches, lies a hidden truth. The real power was never in the bomb. The real power was in the fear of it. See, the Manhattan Project was the largest, most secretive military operation in human history. Up to that point in time, there had been nothing like it ever. There was over 130,000 personnel that worked across dozens of sites, completely compartmentalized between each other, meaning each group knew nothing of each other's projects. Very few knowing what they were actually working and building. The public was told the result was a successful development of nuclear fission weapons tested at Trinity and unleashed upon Japan. But from the beginning, the inconsistencies began to emerge. The Trinity footage, used as definitive proof of the bomb's success, was heavily edited, reshot, reassembled. The blast crater was suspiciously small. Some of the footage released to the public was later admitted to be simulated. Even scientists who worked on the project have confessed that the information was tightly controlled and many aspects were unknown even to those on the inside. So we've covered the celestial constraints, the requirements for detonation. Now let's consider how the myth was weaponized. See, the successful detonation of 2 bombs within that allowed harmonic window in August of 1945 gave the illusion of absolute control. But that absolute control was exactly a fear-mongering tactic. It was an illusion that had to be sustained. It became the cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy, the justification for all of NATO. The entire UN NATO assembly was justified based off of this, aka the beast system. This was the justified reason for the arms race, the driving force behind the Cold War. But if we look closely, since 1945, not a singular nuclear weapon has been used in warfare. And no time after that. Not in Vietnam, not in Korea, not during the Cuban Missile Crisis, not during the Gulf War. No military conflicts since then. You ever wonder why? I know I have. It cannot be by the restraint of man. There would have been some person just crazy enough to do it. Many of these wars were absolutely brutal, protracted. If these weapons were reliable, deployable, military strategy would have demanded their use, but they never were used. So what we have uncovered is these weapons, bound by God's laws, harmonic laws, restricted to God's timing. See, governments may threaten, but they cannot detonate on command. So this illusion had to be maintained. The illusion became a psychological weapon. The term mutually assured destruction emerged, suggesting that any nuclear attack would result in complete global annihilation. The public was conditioned with air raid drills, bomb shelters, fallout zones, Cold War propaganda, films like The Day After, public service announcements like Duck and Cover, and even cartoons were used to shape generational fear. The military built entire underground cities at the cost of trillions of taxpayer dollars, all built around the lie, the nuclear infrastructure. And then it expanded into space, not because they feared the attack, but because they needed the public to fear it. Because fear is compliance. Fear is funding. Fear keeps the machine running and the population in check. This illusion was so powerful that it created an entirely new global order. The United Nations was formed under the guise of preventing said nuclear war. Treaties like SALT, START, and the NPT were introduced not to manage arms, but to preserve the myth, the illusion. See, if the public ever learned that the most powerful weapons at the time were literally more than just theater pieces, that they could not detonate without divine timing, the power structure would collapse overnight. Even more revealing is how this illusion was used to control not only the enemies, but allies, nations that attempted to develop nuclear technology independently were instantly sanctioned, threatened, or invaded. Think about how many nations we have used the justification tool. Iraq, Iran, North Korea, Libya. The list keeps going. The reason was not to prevent nuclear war, but to prevent the lie from being exposed. A rogue nation with a real device would try to detonate it outside of the allowed harmonic window, causing that failure the whole world would witness. The illusion would shatter. So instead, those nations are kept in check, not by power, but by the narrative itself. And what makes the deception even more tragic is how it has distracted humanity from the real threat. While the world was trained to look in the sky for fear of missiles, secret weapons have been developed in our underground cities and technologies orbiting outer space. These weapons are based off scalar resonance, direct energy weapons, plasma pulses, atmospheric HARP manipulations. These are the weapons that match the judgments of Scripture: fire from heaven, melting flesh, destruction that comes in a moment. See, the real weapons are hidden. The fake ones are paraded all around, talked about on all the media sources. So from a spiritual perceptive, this deception is exactly what we were warned about. Matthew 24, Jesus warns of the great deception in the last days. In Revelations, we are told that the beast would rise with power to make fire come down from the heaven in the sight of man. Could it be that the nuclear myth was merely the opening act, preparing the world to fear what man can do, so that when the false fire comes, either through fallen technology or demonic power, the world would bow in awe? The bomb was never just a weapon. They treated it as a god, a false god of terror, war, political supremacy. It was used to manipulate humanity into submission. But God has never surrendered his throne. The weapon works only when God allows it. It is bound by his laws. It is governed by his timing. Man may build it, but God controls the ignition. The nuclear myth is the cornerstone of modern fear. And like all idols, it must be torn down before the truth can rise. So we're going to go back to the beginning, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, to examine whether the first two detonations were even nuclear at all. We will expose inconsistencies, compare the evidence, and ask the hard question. Did we witness the birth of the atomic age or the greatest psychological operation in modern history? Understand that what I am saying doesn't mean that they can't use them. But they have to be used within a specific window. More importantly, that specific window is approaching right now. That window is from mid-July to mid-August. And I'm going to share with you all the grid nodes and coordinates that align. It's not just a few. There is a global grid of nodes and ley lines that intersect. So don't get too disarmed, because this can still happen. But it doesn't happen just when anyone wants it to. I'll show you through the grid lines and the ley lines and the coordinate intersections of the different degrees that there are many, 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 many cities across the world that fall into the very specific point. One of them, New Orleans. So, if we go back to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they've become like sacred pillars in the gospel of the nuclear age. They were invoked as moral justification for the arms race, as the evidence of science power to end wars, and as a solemn warning of what could happen if humanity ever lets down its guard. These two bombings are held up as indisputable proof that nuclear weapons not only work, but their destructive capability is beyond comprehension. But the moment we begin to really examine what actually happened through, just using your God-given discernment and physical evidence and historical records that are online, when I started piecing this together, I was like, oh, good grief. There's even survivor testimony. We find when we look at this in the full context that there is a lot of uncertainty and contradictions. I was hoping to find confirmation that these were the two detonations that proved. But we'll begin with what the world was told. August 6, 45, precisely 8:15 a.m., the United States dropped a uranium-based bomb named Little Boy over Hiroshima. 3 days later, August 9th, 11:02 a.m., a plutonium-based bomb named Fat Man was dropped over Nagasaki. These two events, we are told, killed over 250,000, ended the Second World War, ushered in the atomic age. Though as I've been digging, I find that neither the physical damage nor the aftermath matches what science says we should expect. And what I mean is photographs of Hiroshima taken after the bombing show an entire wooden neighborhood burned to ash. All the wood structures totally decimated, but steel bridges, concrete buildings remain standing. I found that to be weird. The famous Hiroshima Peace Dome, located near what would have been Ground Zero, was left partially intact, its skeleton frame still rising into the air, while structures, blocks away from there, a dozen blocks away, were just turned to ashes, but they were wooden. So the damage pattern in Hiroshima looks nearly identical to what happened in Tokyo, which had been devastating. Because what they did in Tokyo months earlier was some of the most powerful incendiary fire bombs the world has ever seen. They used nothing more than magnesium-based napalm. In fact, the firebombing of Tokyo, March 9th, 1945, known as Operation Meeting House, was deadlier than Hiroshima, because there was over 100,000 unalived in just a single night. An estimated 1 million left homeless. The destruction was so widespread, but yet it did not require nuclear fission. So why then was Hiroshima declared the turning point in warfare, while Tokyo was not even talked about? Because Hiroshima served as a greater purpose, served as a visual, emotional, a global spectacle, a declaration to the world that the United States had held godlike power. But was it truly nuclear is the question. So as I continue to dig, the issue of radiation is my next checkpoint of inconsistencies. In Hiroshima, survivors were back in the city within days. Rescue and cleanup crews entered the city not even wearing protective gear. Some of them had masks. There were no reports of immediate radiation sickness in any of the masses. Children played in the rubble within weeks. The city was rebuilt quickly. And to this day, there is no signs of long-term contamination, no barren wasteland, no genetic mutation zones. The same is true for Nagasaki. If these cities were truly bombed with weapons that released intense radiation, what happened to it? Because I know the half-life of radiation is much longer than 3 days. It's thousands of years. Example, look at the effects of Chernobyl and other nuclear test zones like Bikini Atoll. They have been completely abandoned. Go to the city outside of Chernobyl. I've seen documentaries. Folks cannot even get near the city without their radiation device starting to click. Furthermore, the symptoms experienced by the survivors, mass burns that they used. They said that, this was radiation burst from the explosion. But these were burns, shockwaves, flying debris, structural collapse, all consistent with a massive firebombing. Not from a thermal pulse of a radiation blast and nuclear detonation. Many eyewitnesses described a blinding flash and a strong wind, but not the kind of instant vaporization and radiation burns that should have happened. Some even described hearing multiple explosions, more in line with a series of conventional charges than a single atomic blast. What makes these anomalies even more suspicious is the timing, the selection of targets. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were among the few major Japanese cities that had been left untouched by U.S. bombing campaign to that point. Cities like Tokyo, Osaka, Kobe had already been reduced to rubble, but Hiroshima was deliberately preserved. This allowed it to serve a controlled environment, untouched by previous damage, fully intact, ideal for a staged demonstration. Nagasaki was a secondary target that day, only bombed after weather conditions prevented the bombing of Kokura. But again, It had minimal prior damage. Why? Because these sites were chosen not for military value, but for their ability to serve as visual proof of a new kind of weapon. They were mostly wood. Then we look at the handling of evidence. The early footage of the mushroom cloud over Hiroshima was staged and reconstructed using footage from later tests, multiple angles, lighting inconsistencies, reshots have been discovered in the archives. The public was shown not a direct live capture of the event, but an edited narrative. Military photographers and news outlets were carefully guided in their messaging. Only select journalists were allowed to access the bomb sites. All the information about the bombing was routed through official military channels before being released to the world. Meanwhile, Japanese leadership was already in secret talking surrender. The United States had intercepted communications showing Japan was seeking terms. General Eisenhower and several other high-ranking U.S. military leaders were opposed to using this new bomb, stating it was military unnecessary. Eisenhower later recalled telling Secretary War Stimon that Japan was already defeated and that dropping the bomb was not necessary. Yet the bomb was dropped anyways, not to end the war, but for demonstration purposes. And it worked. With those two detonations, both perfectly timed within the narrow harmonic window, discovered later by many different scientists and whistleblowers, the United States presented to the world an illusion of an unstoppable force. It was not simply the beginning of the atomic age, but the weaponization of lies. The bomb became the most powerful in reputation than in function. It became the psychological sword held over the world's neck. It was not meant to be used again. It was meant for control, for manipulation, for fear. So from that point forward, the narrative became sacred. Any questioning of Hiroshima and Nagasaki became kind of a historical blasphemy. And yet when we examine the actual evidence, a different story emerges. The damage was consistent with what happened in Tokyo and that enormous firebombing. The radiation was almost non-existent after a month. That's not how it works when it comes to radiation. The lies. The narrative was tightly controlled. The targets were preserved for a spectacle. The timing allowed perfectly with the solar and geomagnetic windows, resulting in fear, gave birth to the beast system. Because it was from that point forward that UN and NATO were built. The beast system was born. So the geometric trigger. This is interesting because this is the hidden laws that prevent nuclear war. So if the nuclear bomb is real but restrained, then the next logical question is how? How is this weapon, supposedly the most powerful force ever devised by man, so rarely used and so narrowly controlled and so mysteriously bound? To answer this, we must move from history into physics. We must examine not only the design of the weapon, but the very structure of creation. What we will find is the atomic bomb is not merely a mechanical invention, but a device that must interact with the earth itself, and only under specific conditions that align twice a year. And at the heart of the atomic bomb lies the concept of critical mass and a minimal amount of fission, a material needed to sustain a chain reaction. For uranium, this can be achieved through a simple gun-like design. For plutonium, the material used in Fat Man, the bomb requires much more advanced method. an implosion mechanism that involves surrounding the plutonium core with an explosive lens that must all detonate simultaneously, sending perfectly symmetrical shock waves inward to compress the core into a supercritical state. And if even one of those lenses detonates slightly too early or too late, the shock wave becomes asymmetrical, the compression fails, and the bomb fizzes. See, this process is known as a geometric trigger. It is much more difficult to achieve than what the public understands. The idea that nations can mass produce hundreds or thousands of these devices and expect each one to function flawlessly, especially in battlefield conditions, is not only unrealistic, but it borders fantasy. These are not rugged weapons. They are extremely delicate systems, dependent upon mathematical perfection. The synchronization of the implosion charges must be timed down to the millisecond, and any deviation causes failure. See, this is only part of the story. As I've talked about the groundbreaking work of Bruce Cathy, who revealed that nuclear weapons also require a cosmic alignment. See, it is that detonation of the cosmos in alignment that is not merely a physical or a chemical process. It is a resonant event bound by Earth's electromagnetic field, the positioning of the sun, the harmonic energy on the grid that overlays the planet has to be all in alignment. Nuclear explosions can only occur when a device is located at a specific point on the Earth's grid, when the solar alignment creates a harmonic window of energy compatible. These windows occur twice a year, and even then, for only a brief moment in time. This is not pseudoscience or conspiracy theory. This is absolute scientific fact. There's been many scientists have figured this out. French nuclear test in the Pacific using only his harmonic equations confirmed this. The French were so accurate that some of their work still remains classified to this day. See, the implications are staggering. Because if these devices cannot detonate outside of these harmonic windows, then most of the world's arsenal is not on standby. It's inherent. The weapon is not merely explosive. It's a dud. And if Hiroshima and Nagasaki actually worked, it was because they were chosen solely based off of that harmonic window. They were chosen because it fell within the August harmonic window, and the detonation timing was precisely aligned to the Earth's geomagnetic field and the sun's positioning. Those windows, once closed, the nuclear weapon is dormant. This is why there has not been another wartime detonation since then. Not because of mercy, not because of treaties. Trust me, they have tried. This is because conditions were not replicated. See, they don't talk about all the additional attempts to do this. During Vietnam, during the Korean War, during Iraq, even during the war right now with Ukraine, they have been launched. Guys, not too long ago, Russia tried to use nukes. They did. The news even reported it. But they couldn't say it was a failure, so they said that it was just a warning shot with non-nuclear munitions attached. Do you guys remember in the last few months, Russia rained down hypersonic missiles out of the sky through multiple re-entry vehicles that came down like Star Wars lasers? You remember that? I can pull the footage if you guys want to see it. It was unlike any weapon they've ever used. They fired their, what was it, the Satan III missile, went into outer space, opened up its delivery vehicle, re-entered the atmosphere. Multiple warheads then dispersed from the re-entry vehicle, hit all their targets, but just had little explosions. That was intended to go boom. That was intended to end the war. But they could not admit that. See, further evidence of this lies in the factricide problem, the fact that detonating multiple nuclear weapons in close proximity causes interference. See, the first explosion creates an electromagnetic pulse, an EMP, atmospheric ionization, and the shock wave disrupts that disables detonation circuits of anything nearby. This means simultaneous nuclear strikes, like those envisioned in the Cold War strategy, were scientifically improbable. Even if hundreds of warheads were launched, the mass majority would fail to reach detonation. The chain reaction would collapse under its own interference. This is why nuclear test detonations are always spaced far apart, carefully timed, never performed simultaneously across multiple regions. All of this confirms just one single truth. These weapons are real, but they are limited by the laws of God. They are not autonomous tools of destruction. They are not plug-and-play warheads. They are not capable of launching spontaneously into any global point and destroying it. The power they possess is only accessible when God permits it. So this brings us once again to Scripture. As in Revelation 9, we read 4 angels bound at the river Euphrates, who are released to kill a third of mankind at the exact hour, day, and month. That specifically is not symbolic. It is a prophetic pattern. It shows that the most catastrophic events in history are not random. They are timed by God. In 2 Thessalonians, we are told that the mystery of lawlessness is already at work, but it is being restrained until the proper time. That restraint is physical, spiritual, and energetic. Whether we knew it or not, God has always placed a lock on mankind's deadliest invention. It cannot function unless He allows it. So the real purpose of the nuclear arsenal, the reality is most of it cannot function outside of a rare harmonic window. So why maintain it? Why build thousands of warheads and spend trillions and then threaten the world with fire that cannot be lit? The answer is fear. Control. The belief that annihilation could come at any moment gives governments the power to shape policy, restrict freedom, justify secrecy, build underground cities, while telling the public it's all for their safety. We were never meant to live in fear of nuclear war. The fear was engineered. The fear was rehearsed. And the weapon, though real, was never available as they claimed. It was designed to work under cosmic conditions that only few know about. It was allowed to function only twice because God permitted it. Since then, it's only been used as threat, fear-mongering, a tool, a symbol, but not a sword. So in the 80s, a new part of this psychological warfare was birthed. They introduced the fantasy of a fear-drenched psychological operation of nuclear winter. So they determined the fear of the blast and the shock wave and the radiation was not enough. So they were told the detonation of a few hundred nuclear weapons could plunge the entire planet into a freezing darkness that would essentially kill off everybody until a man-made ice age. This theory was called nuclear winter. It became gospel in the nuclear narrative. It transformed the fear of war into the fear of complete survival altogether. And it's interesting where the theory came from. Because, see, the term nuclear winter was popularized by a group of scientists known as the TTAPs, a team. Richard Turco, Owen Toon, Thomas Ackerman, James Pollock, Carl Sagan. These men claimed that even a limited exchange of these weapons would release so much soot and smoke into the upper atmosphere that it would block out the sunlight for months, possibly years. The Earth's surface temperature would plummet, plants would die, starvation would follow. The theory was dramatized through vivid illustrations, computer models, apocalyptic television broadcasts. But what few people realize is that the models were all based off a theory, built off assumptions, based off of a lie that even these guys didn't know it existed. This was not real world data. Everyone that I just listed was not aware of the thermal triggering system, timing, and window. So Carl Sagan, the most public voice of this group, started with the confidence that if nuclear war ever occurred, even a limited in scope, it would end the life as we know it. He predicted planetary death, spiral perpetration of darkness, frozen fields, and the collapse of civilization. But just a few years later, the real-world events would expose the cracks in this model. In 1991, the Gulf War triggered one of the largest oil fires in human history when Saddam Hussein ignited over 600 Kuwaiti oil wells. For months, dense black smoke filled the sky. Many scientists feared that this would cause a miniature nuclear winter, because the amount of soot and smoke and chemicals that were put into the atmosphere was 1,000 times more than what would result from a massive nuclear exchange. But surprisingly, nothing happened. The smoke dissipated. The temperatures remained stable. Life continued. The climate impact was negligible. All the models that they had predicted completely failed and flopped. Then other events started to further debunk this entire theory. The Toba supervolcano that erupted thousands of years ago released far more ash and gas than any man-made conflict ever could. Yet, even it did not lead to a permanent extinction. Forest fires, volcano eruptions, industrial disasters have shown that the Earth's atmosphere is far more resilient than what they tell us. Their simulations and all their worst case scenarios and all their worst case unrealistic assumptions about how much soot would reach the atmosphere and how long it would remain suspended and even how it would spread across the globe. Later studies from other academic scientists all proved it completely wrong. But unfortunately, the media never released and talked about these findings, so the fear had already taken root. Nuclear winter was not a scientific conclusion, it was a psychological escalation. It was designed not only to add fear to the concept of nuclear war, but to justify global control. Under the banner of preventing nuclear winter, world leaders would call for international regulations, talking about energy, agricultural, and responsible defense. It created a gateway and opened the doors to the climate control agenda birthed by King Charles in the early 80s. Food rationing, environmental surveillance. And when the fear of nuclear war began to fade, the same fear tactics were transferred on the climate change initiative. The language, the models, the imagery, all identical. Same spirit, just renamed. The deception. So let us consider the spiritual layer to this. God promised in Genesis 8:22, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. This is not poetic. It's a promise. It's a divine decree. It's God's declaration that the earth's seasons, cycles, rhythms will not be interrupted by man. Nuclear winter? Not possible. Flawed. It is a direct contradiction of the Word of God. It implies that man has the ability to override the Creator's covenant, that human warfare can halt the process that God Himself said will never happen. So it's important to understand that the Bible, it means what it says. It says what it means. And this is why anytime the Bible, certain things prove its authenticity, for example, all of Ron Wyatt's findings, they're tightly and powerfully suppressed. Never make it to full light. Matter of fact, a lot of Ron's findings are being resurfaced right now, and new claims are being made that they were just found. The deception never ceases. You know, the nuclear winter narrative gained prominence. Just as public interest in nuclear fear was fading, the Cold War was losing steam. People were growing weary of endless drills and fear propaganda. Nuclear winter reignited the narrative, introducing global extinction without explosions. The world no longer needed to be destroyed by fire. It could destroy it through smoke and carbon. And this was the bridge that King Charles, Prince Charles, led into the climate hysteria, birthed the carbon credit system, birthed the global environmental treaties. The fear of man's fire evolved into the fear of man's own undoing. Nuclear winter was the gateway into the modern technocratic control of the WEF. What are we left with? A theory based off of untested models, exaggerated outcomes, retracted predictions. A theory that is completely false. A theory that contradicts Scripture. A theory that serves as a globalist agenda, keeps mankind in a constant state of dependency on elite decision makers. All of this is never about science. It's all about control and submission. These are the fully resonant nodes that are the energy points. And what's interesting is Dr. Joy talked about these last night, but not for the same reason. These are the detonation points that there's 2 windows each year. There's one a few weeks in February and a few weeks in late July, early August. And this is when the perfect alignment between the sun and the magnetosphere is in a resonance to allow these detonations. And if you look closer and actually reflect on what she said last night, these are energy resonant points with the Earth's grid. So it's at these points that these detonations are allowed. There's one in the United States over New Orleans, but the proximity of these detonation points are about 200, 300 miles. So you can give or take a little. For example, you have one over here near Tokyo. But the most interesting one that I find is this one right here. Smack dab over the pyramids of Giza. See, these are technologies, and these are things that the fallen angels have known before the flood. These are things that the fallen angels allowed the Nazi Empire to understand. Nuclear weapons, they are real. But the window to use them and the locations that they can be used on makes them rare. It's not just something that, if provoked, they can just pull the trigger. I just want to make sure everybody's clear on this point. If I need to revisit the detonation window, I will before I go further, because it's important that everybody understands how these operate. If you guys are all tracking, I'll continue on with where I left off. But if I need to revisit exactly the reason why the nuclear weapons do not work the way they make people think, yeah, I went over all of this in yesterday's show, guys. I went into deep detail, but here, we'll go back. I'll circle back around. So, the nuclear bomb, it is real, but it's restrained. The next logical question is to ask how. How is this weapon, supposedly the most powerful force ever devised by man, so rarely used, so narrowly controlled, and so mysteriously bound? So, I'm going to answer this. We must move from the history into the very physics of this, because we will examine the hidden physics and the design, because this is something that the military leaders at the very top of the ladder understand. In the very structure of God's physical laws. And what we find is that the atomic bomb is not merely a mechanical invention, but a device that must interact with Earth itself. And only under very specific conditions will it work. And see, at the heart of the atomic bomb lies the concept of a critical mass, a minimum amount of fission, its material needed to sustain a chain reaction. For the ones based in uranium, this is achieved through a simple gun-type design. But for plutonium, the material used in Fat Man over Japan, the bomb requires much more advanced science. An implosion mechanism. This involves surrounding the plutonium core with an explosive lens that must all detonate simultaneously, sending perfect symmetry of shock waves inward to compress the trigger core into a supercritical state. If even one of the lenses is out of alignment or detonates slightly too early or too late, the shock wave internally becomes asymmetrical. The compression fails and the bomb fizzles. See, this is something you guys can all look into on your own. This is called a geometric trigger. And it's far more difficult to achieve than what the public understands. The idea is that nations can mass produce these or walk around with suitcase devices and each one to function flawlessly in battlefield conditions or just in the general public is unrealistic, and it actually borderlines fantasy. These are not rugged weapons. They are very delicate systems that depend on mathematical perfection. And the synchronization of the explosive and implosion must be timed to the millisecond for that detonation to correctly proceed. So after they got that figured out, you have to understand that there is a cosmic alignment required. This detonation is not merely physical or a chemical process. It is a resonant event bound by the Earth's electromagnetic field, the positioning of the sun, the harmonic energy grid that overlays the planet is absolutely required and critical to understand. Nuclear explosions can only occur when the device is at a specific grid point on the Earth's grid, which is what I was showing you on that image. Beyond being at that specific grid point, that resonant window part of the planet, there has to be a solar alignment that creates a harmonic window to make the energy capable of being exchanged. And this window occurs twice a year. See, this is not pseudoscience or speculation. This is fact and physics, and anyone can look into this on their own. The work is so accurate that it is so highly classified that very few understand this, and the implications are staggering because these devices, they cannot detonate outside of these harmonic windows. There has been many, many attempts to do this. Understand that the world's arsenal is not on a ready standby. They are simply paperweights unless that window is open. See, this explains why Hiroshima and Nagasaki worked. They were not chosen for military strategies. They were chosen because they fell between the harmonic window and August, and the detonation timing was precisely aligned to the Earth's geomagnetic field and the sun's position. That window opened twice a year for a short time. Otherwise, nuclear weapons are simply dormant. This was the only wartime detonation on record. That was 1945, 70, 80 years ago. And it's not because of mercy from man, not because of treaties, because the conditions could not be replicated. So, do you guys understand? Or do I need to go deeper? I can go deeper if we need to. See, the detonation happens within this specific window, and then more importantly, the multiple exchange of nuclear warheads is not probable because these explosions, each one of them creates their own EMP, an ionized location. The shockwave disrupts and disables all detonation circuits to any nearby warheads. This means that simultaneous nuclear strikes, like the ones they teach as far as like the Cold War strategy, they're scientifically improbable. Even if hundreds of warheads were launched, the vast majority would fail to reach detonation because the chain reaction would collapse under its own interference. This is why nuclear test detonations are always spaced apart, carefully timed, and never performed simultaneously across multiple regions. This also confirms a singular truth, that nuclear weapons are real, but they are limited by the laws of creation by God's design. They are not autonomous tools of destruction. They're not plug-and-play warheads. They're not capable of launching spontaneously into a coordinated global annihilation. The power they possess is only accessible when the heavens permit it. And Scripture gives us ideas into this. We read that the 4 angels bound at the river Euphrates are released to kill a third of mankind at an exact hour, day, and month. It being specific is not symbolic, it is prophetic. It shows that the most catastrophic events in history are not random, they are timed by God. The restraint, understand, is beyond physical and spiritual. It's whether or not that God has placed a lock on these times. See, the real purpose behind the whole nuclear concept is for fear and control. That's the real bomb itself. Because this is a known secret within tight circles. Very tightly secured. And this is why they build underground cities. By telling the public it's for their own safety. But they know the truth. They understand the Bible is real, guys. See, the global elites, they believe that Lucifer is going to take his place at the rightful high part of the throne. He's going to dethrone our God, Jesus, and take his rightful place as he ascends above the Most High. Lucifer has them all deceived. They don't understand that he has already lost. Does this make sense, guys? Or should I go deeper? Let me know. So, if detonation requires precise celestial alignment, and if nuclear winter is more than a myth than science, then what we need to ask is the next logical question. Did you guys see the interview with the Secretary of State that spoke for the administration about 2 or 3 weeks ago that says we possess advanced weapons that no one is aware of, that we have weapons that affect and alter space and time? How many saw that White House press briefing where he slipped of the tongue and announced these things, spoke of solar warden projects and the real technology that they harbor?
Passenger planes are slower than they used to be. Our trains crawl compared to those in other parts of the world. Our cars do not fly. Advances have not stopped, but something has gone wrong. Stagnation was a choice. We have weighed down our builders and innovators. The well-intentioned regulatory regime of the 1970s became an ever-tightening ratchet, first hampering America's ability to become a net energy exporter and then making it harder and harder to build. We seem to have lost focus and vision, to have lowered our sights and let systems and structures and bureaucracies muddle us along. But we are capable of so much more. Our technologies permit us to manipulate time and space. They leave distance annihilated, cause things to grow and improve productivity. Our passenger...
So we apparently have technology that can manipulate time and space.
I'm not sure if he was supposed to reveal that, because what he is talking about is things that this government has had for the last 40 or 50 years. It all ties into solar warden. And I mentioned not too long ago that we would start to see them releasing this information. Some may have saw me mention that. Some may have not. But there's a reason why I've had you guys watching these things, because they're going to start releasing this information, but they're going to twist the truth. So it's important that you guys understand. So these technologies, they have been developed for quite some time. You ever wonder why the money is not going into topside infrastructure, why the roads continue to fall apart, why the schools look like they're still operating off of 40-year-old chalkboards? And you see the point. The money is going into other things. Half of the nation's debt has gone underground. From what they have admitted, $22 trillion, at least that's what they've admitted, it's probably more, has gone into the development of their technologies, developed behind closed doors. And these weapons, they don't rely on unstable plutonium and harmonic weapons. You have to understand that the concept of the nuclear warhead, this is ancient, old technology. There's a reason why they've only been used twice, because they have to align celestial, they have to align with grid points, they have to align with specific timing, and they also have to use very unstable ingredients like plutonium. So what we have is weapons that they really have. They talk about them in Solar Warden. These weapons match descriptions of divine judgment in Scripture. Fire from the sky, national defense, great deception, war against humanity itself. So the answer begins with something most people have never heard of called scalar weapons. This is scalar energy, sometimes referred to as longitudinal waves matched with zero-point energy, or Tesla-based waveforms that operates not within the electromagnetic spectrum, but something much deeper, within the fundamental layer of reality. These are waves that move through the very fabric of vacuum of space and time. They do not dissipate with distance. They can be focused over any amount of distance and time, amplified and directed with astonishing precision. We saw examples with this in Maui, Hawaii. People often refer to these as dues. These dues are absolutely a real thing, and they will never admit to it until they are forced or until they're ready to display that part of their agenda. See, the realm of these energy weapons that leave no trace, but yet devastate targets across space and time, is a real thing. And one of the most outspoken voices in this field is Colonel Tom Bearden, a retired U.S. Army officer and a physicist who has been blowing the whistle for decades that scalar weapon systems have been developed in secrecy. These weapons can cause earthquakes, can cause heart attacks in people, can disable electronics at any grid point on the planet, can ignite structures into flames instantly, can ignite structures within to burn from inside out, can manipulate weather patterns, and unlike conventional weapons, they require no visible delivery system. A building or a city can be destroyed from hundreds or thousands of miles away without a missile. No explosion and no trace. These are not theories. These systems have been in operation since the 60s. We've seen hints of this all over. Go back to Maui, Hawaii. We saw trees still standing. But we saw metal cars and their metal rims literally melted. Do you know how hot it has to burn to make metal melt into fluid? But yet the trees standing 5 feet away, the leaves are still green. Earthquakes without warnings, hurricanes that stall unnaturally over top of cities, skies that light up with flashes of color, plasma. These are signs not of a natural phenomenon, but of controlled targeting energy manipulation. And many of these, quote, so-called natural disasters of the last 2 decades have been these very weapon systems. One of the most famously used is the DEW. These are high-powered microwave lasers, electromagnetic pulse systems that are deployed everywhere. They are mounted into thousands of satellites that orbit the planet. They are mounted on top of M1 Abrams tanks. They are mounted on destroyer cruisers. The U.S. military, DARPA, and many of the private contractors like Raytheon have openly admitted that they have been a part of the development of these. What they have not admitted is their full capability. But there's been many people that have come on the Sean Ryan show that have talked about this, the folks that have worked for Raytheon. Again, this is not conspiracy theory. This is fact. When you've worked with inside of some of the most secretive agencies in the world, or have family members that have, you understand the capability of the wicked, and that their wickedness has no means of a cap. See, these DEWs can slice through steel at the speed of light. They can ignite wildfires in dry brushes. They can disable entire city blocks without a sound. I've already mentioned to you the 2023 wildfire in Lahaina. Then there's the 2017 Santa Rosa firestorm. Other disasters. Targeted instantaneous combustion, not random wildfire behavior. We saw it in Los Angeles several months ago. They used the cover of arson. But see, these high-frequency active auroral research programs have been studying the ionosphere for a long time. They've long suspected of the global energy capability because the fallen angels were using it with their pyramids before the flood. What they do is they send high frequency waves into the upper atmosphere. HAARP then shifts the jet streams, influences the storm systems, creates high energy fields that affect everything from human biology to communications. It is only one of many installations that are all over the planet. But, we ask ourselves why? Why develop weapons that can burn cities invisibly, collapse buildings without explosives, melt steel without fire? Because the era of visible war is over. I'm going to try to code this. But you guys remember what happened on September 11th? The year before 2002? Reflect on that. Think about that while I talk. That was a combination of blue beam technology and direct energy assaults. The capability of collapsing structures, making steel that is meant to hold thousands of tons up turn into spaghetti, to ignite explosions. How many of you understand that what happened that year was truly not terror from outside our nation, but from terror within our own leadership to move forward with a high-tech surveillance control, setting the stage for the beast system? It was the very first step. The very first step. See, the wars of the future are going to be covert, quiet, deniable. We've seen this right now with what's going on with those two nations that we keep reporting on the news. You see how no one's taking responsibility for what's going on? They're blaming it on different people because there are proxies. They give the public the illusion that this nation's against that nation. But it's not the truth. It's all cover for something darker and more sinister. And without accountability, they create fear without a visible enemy. See, these weapons are not just for the military. They are technological instruments of domination. And they're being positioned for the enforcement of the arm of the beast system. Everything that's happening right now is trial runs for how they're going to play their hand when the beast system comes online and the mark is released. This is where the connection to biblical prophecy becomes undeniable, because in Zechariah 14:12, the prophet describes a plague from the Lord where their flesh will dissolve while they stand on their feet. Their eyes shall dissolve in their sockets, and their tongues shall dissolve in their mouths. This is not conventional. This is instantaneous, targeted vaporization, scalar weapons, directed energy systems. Revelations 13:13 says the second beast causes fire to fall from the heaven in the sight of man, deceiving the earth. This is not nuclear missiles. It is man-made, divine mimicry. It is the fire of the false gods, powered by the fallen angel technology, unveiled at the end times as a miracle that compels the worship of the beast. So now you understand. And it's important that you guys really wrap your heads around this. The nuclear weapons served one purpose submission, fear, control, because we've entered a new era. We're not going to see the talk of these nuclear weapons because they're obsolete. The people in charge, they know they don't work unless it's an isolated window, and the alignment of the cosmos has to align perfectly. That makes no sense for them. It is now the fallen angel technologies with direct energy weapons that are reliable, that can enforce global obedience. Because look, those bombs, that was never the final weapon. It was the false idol, raised to shape belief, justify secrecy, and fund the infrastructure, fund the underground bases, fund global control. But the true fire of judgment will not be dropped from planes. It will be invisible, atmospheric, electromagnetic, summoned by sound frequencies. And when it is unleashed, it will seem as though heaven itself has turned against the earth. But it will not be God's fire, not yet. It will be the counterfeit, and it will lead millions into deception. Revelation talks about the false signs, lying wonders, as the image of the beast and the false prophets able to call down fire from heaven. And all this perfectly aligns with what Jesus told us in Matthew 24. Again, false prophets will arise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. These weapons will be the foundation for those signs: fire from heaven, unexplainable destruction, technology miracles, that force that the world will be put into submission for. But we, us, remnant, we are awake and will not be deceived. This is why the Lord has me bring this information to you, because this is truth. The real weapons are here. They have been here, behind closed doors. And that slight slip of the tongue, whether that was intentional or not by the White House, is part of a larger reveal that we're going to see in the coming times. And the war is not against nations. The war is going to be against the saints, against truth, and against the knowledge of God. We know nuclear weapons are real, but they are not omnipotent. They are not ready to fire at a moment's notice. They are not controlled solely by generals or governments. Their ability to detonate is constrained by God's laws, written into creation by God himself. These restraints are not symbolic. They are measurable, and they are binding. You know, this teaching really asks the most sobering question of all. Will the enemy be permitted to use these weapons again? See, the key ley lines is groundbreaking. The physicists who understand this have made it so that really anyone can understand this if they simply just research it. Because these detonations can only happen under an incredibly narrow harmonic resonant window with very specific ley line points around the planet. This detonation requires not just critical mass and explosive symmetry, but it also requires the alignment of the positions on the Earth's energy grid in perfect synchronization with the position of the sun. It is a triangulation of geometry, magnetism. Sorry, words are hard. Essentially, it's cosmic timing. These alignments create a harmonic window that the natural restraints of nuclear energy are lifted, and these detonations are possible. But these windows typically occur only twice a year, one in February and the other one through late July to mid-August. The real detonation moments is not a wide open opportunity. It's a span of sometimes minutes throughout each day. Within brief intervals, the sun's angle, the Earth's rotation, the device's exact coordinates must all align in perfect resonance. If they do not, the detonation will fail and just produce a small yield. We saw this already again. I'll remind everyone that Russia launched its intercontinental ballistic missiles. I forget what they were called. It was maybe Satan 1 or 2 that they launched. It had a re-entry vehicle, a delivery system that came down at hypersonic speeds. And many warheads thumped into Ukraine. But the yield was just the impact. There was no actual explosion. There was no nuclear explosion, but the intention was there. See, this is why Hiroshima and Nagasaki worked, because the timing was precise. Look at the dates of both of those bombs. Within the window, late July, early August, specific hours of the day when the alignment was not by chance, but by design. Now understand this, if the enemy intends to use nuclear detonation again, not merely as a weapon of destruction, but as a false sign of wonder, as Revelations 13 tells us, then we and he must wait for the window to return. That window is coming in the next 90 days. July 22nd to August 14th, if I'm not mistaken. I have it written down. And it must be positioned specifically and wait for the gate to open. The one location in our nation, the United States, is a perimeter around New Orleans. Now, Revelations 9 confirms a similar structure, that the four angels are bound at the Euphrates and only released at a specific hour, day, month, and year. Not a second earlier, not a second later. This is how God works. Every judgment, every release of wrath, every allowance of evil happens only on God's timetable. The Antichrist himself is restrained until the appointed time when his restrainer is lifted. Now, a lot of people are giving me pushback on what I call the restrainer, but that's not up for me to debate over. I've given you what he gave me, and you guys do what you wish with that information. I'm simply the messenger. The weapon systems of the beast are no different. They are allowed only when God permits. This is why we watch windows. If the enemy's going to use nuclear, based off of a fire and false flag event, using it for global deception, it will come during these rare alignments, these harmonic windows. February, late July, early August. These are not predictions of guaranteed events. They are only just the times in which these events could physically be possible, based on specific physical laws and cosmic laws governed by God himself. See, this changes everything, guys, because it means that even the most terrifying weapons of man are not autonomous. They are bound. They are held back by design, and they are restrained until the moment of God's sovereign timeline allows them to function. The bomb is not God. God is God. And he has set a lock upon certain destructions. This means we must not be spiritually sleeping. We have to be awake. We must be prophetically vigilant. The remnant must watch and pray. We are not called to fear, but we are called to discern the hour. Just as the wise men watched the heavens and understood the timing of Christ's first coming, so too must we understand the timing of what the enemy is preparing. When fire falls from the sky in the sight of men, it will be deception. It will look divine. It will sound prophetic, but it will be a counterfeit. And millions, billions will be deceived unless they are told. Think about it. It's all tied to the sky. The beast must wait for the appointed hour. So with all that said, We are now entering one of the key harmonic detonation windows within the next 90 days based off of my research and what the Lord has led me to regarding the Earth's energy grid and celestial geometry. The next window, as I've said, will fall between, let's see, I had it right, July 22nd and August 14th. That's the peak resonance expected around August 6th and 9th. Notably, the anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This timing also aligns with one of the two annual harmonic windows in which it is necessary for triangulation between the sun's positions and the Earth's magnetic field. The detonation location all have to synchronize to allow release of this nuclear energy. However, this window is not a green light for global detonation. The bomb must also be located at one of the very specific grid points, as I shared on the screen. I'll put it on the screen again and make sure that my mic is working. Mic's working. These grid points, if you can see them, see, only certain latitudes and longitudes, specific coordinates are permitted. Those that align with precise multiples of 30, 60, and 90 and 180 degrees. They are resonant harmonically during these windows. The altitude of detonation also affects the outcome, as the resonance must not only be timed physically, horizontally across the Earth's surface, but vertically through the atmosphere. In short, detonation is only possible in specific nodes, points on Earth's energy grid, during these short cosmic alignments. So if we reflect on history, nuclear test sites have all been located within harmonic viable zones, such as Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Also, look at Australia. We'll see one of those nodes there where they test a lot. See, there's two right here in Australia where most of the detonations, a lot of the tests are done. So understand, if a nuclear event, whether false flag or a military operation or a prophetic deception, is planned, it must occur within these windows. As the detonation cannot be carried out just anywhere, most of the major cities are not located on these grid points, so they're not viable targets. See, this sharply narrows the list of potential targets. Means the enemy must be extremely precise in his planning. Even with modern GPS systems and advanced delivery mechanisms, the laws of creation cannot be bypassed, only navigated. Strategically, this reveals much about the beast system. The architects of the global control understand this reality, guys, which is why many high-level drills, underground base locations, and continuity of government systems are positioned along these same harmonic energy lines. If the beast is to call down fire from the heaven, Revelations 13, it will happen from a grid-aligned location, from one of these brief cosmic windows, and likely be presented as a divine extraterrestrial sign to compel global submission. See, this makes the upcoming 90-day period a critical watch point. The fire cannot fall unless heaven allows it. The weapon cannot ignite unless the grid permits it. And the enemy cannot act until the appointed hour arrives. If you guys want my notes, it really breaks down the grid, because it's not arbitrary. And what's really interesting, it's based off the Earth's rotation. It's based off the globe. Hence, why I give flat Earth folks such a hard time. Because this grid is not arbitrary. It's formed and based off its rotation, magnetic field, solar interactions, based off a 360-degree sphere. This 360-degree system, 30, 60, 90, and 180, because these numbers cleanly divide by 360. Each division corresponds with key energy thresholds in these nodes. These degree points, both longitude and latitude, are the neutral grid conjunction points where energy converges and harmonizes. It's a geometric net over the globe. The fallen angels knew this, which is why they put the pyramids all over the planet in these specific points. Nuclear detonation, which releases a harmonic burst of atomic energy, must be in sync with the field and the sun and the rotation. See, New Orleans sits directly on this intersection of 30 degrees north, 90 degrees west longitude. This places the harmonic crossroad, a major grid point that is naturally resonant with a highly sensitive energy intersection. That location is ideal for scalar weapon experimentation, atmospheric resonance, and if timed with the proper solar alignment, even nuclear triggering. Guys, I know many are like, oh, this is conspiracy theory. Let me tell you, this is science and fact, and is known amongst most of the classified military planners, researchers in the energy weapon development. These energies are why cities like New Orleans, Cairo, Baghdad, Giza, all located near 30-degree band points. They are electromagnetically powerful and spiritually significant. The elite understand this. The occult understands this. Their surveillance understations and installations understands this. The underground facilities are placed according to these grid alignments. I have a list of cities that align. If it interests you, I'll send them to you. Nevada test site in USA has a longitude of 37 and longitude of 116 divisible by 180. One of the harmonic points. So is Russia, where Russia set off their big bomb. I forget what that one was called. I got it written down somewhere. Russia has 3 grid points. Western Australia has 2. South Africa has 1. Japan sits near 2. There are many. These coordinates can be plotted on any map, any tool. You can even use Google Earth. The most precise visuals will show energy burst points, and if you go back through history and align these grid lines representing the Earth's energy grid matrix and the ley lines, it will all make sense, especially if you time it with the solar alignment.